One of the most powerful features of Logos Bible software is its ability to take you deeper into the biblical languages. Now, that can be a dangerous tool, so by much information, you can draw quick conclusions and perhaps think you know more than you actually do. I'm certainly not a Greek or Hebrew scholar, but it's a part of my study that I tried to keep up. I took Greek and Hebrew in seminary years ago. I'm trying to continue growing and learning and trying to actually use those tools. And so it's really helpful for me to be able to delve into the languages and also to access trusted resources around those languages. And Logos has a lot of tools to be able to do that. So I want to show you some of those, specifically how I use it week in and week out as I'm studying, and make some recommendations on how maybe you can set Logos up to do appropriate, safe, but also helpful word studies or looks into the specific language behind the passage that you're reading. I've got Logos pulled up, and we've been working through these custom layouts. I've got my one for Luke open right now. This is what I pull up most weeks when I'm opening a passage of scripture to study for whether a presentation on YouTube, some teaching, or the sermons that I'm preaching through books of the Bible. And on the right-hand side, I've got my Bible passage open. I mentioned in a tutorial on custom layouts that I like to keep the interlinear tools simple and down here at the bottom. So at any time, I can click on a word, and it will show me down below. It'll highlight it, give me the word as it shows up in the manuscript, the root sort of lexical form of the lemma, as well as, I can actually get some basic parsing. If I hover over, it'll show me the parsing information. I also keep open the Greek New Testament as I'm studying. So if I want to see, again, this interlinear is giving it to me in English order, which is not the exact order the Greek comes in. So if I'm interested in looking at what is actually in the Greek, I can switch over and look at that verse. And again, if I hover over, you'll notice down here in the bottom, it's giving me basically the parsing of that word with a basic sense at the end, not really a translation, but kind of basic definition. And then I also, in the layout tutorial, showed you the lexical guide that I'll use if I want to dig deeper into, maybe my Greek's not great. If I'm struggling with the translation of a particular verse, I can come over and it'll give me a little extra help word by word seeing. But if I want to go deeper into a particular word, more than just this one place that it's being used, a kind of word study, there's some great tools for that. So let's say I was reading here this verse, one day as Jesus was teaching the people in the temple and preaching the gospel. If I click over, you'll notice this phrase, preaching the gospel, is really just one word. So if I look at it down here, you can see it's from the Greek word euangelizo. So from like the good news, but it's the verb version of that. So if I wanted to, I've got basic information, but I can right click on that word and I get a lot of things I can do here. It's pulling up a lot of information about that sentence. But you'll notice one of the options I have is for a Bible word study. Now, I can do that word study based on the version of that word that is showing up here within the manuscript. So you can see it's a genitive ending. So if I'm interested in that specific, the way the word's being used as it's parsed there. But more often than what I do is click the second version down here, which is what's called the lemma. This is how you're going to find it if you look up the word in a dictionary. So this is the sort of root verb, the present active indicative. So once I've got that clicked, then I'll click on Bible word study. And you'll see that it's given me that basic word. It's opened it up. And Logos has pulled together a basic definition. One of the things that's often handy is you can actually get a pronunciation of it. Euangelizo, so maybe their pronunciation's a little better than mine. And then you'll get a basic definition. So proclaiming good news. That's where we get preach the gospel from here. But the other thing I've got is all of the dictionaries or lexicons that I have, so I can open those up and see. And we'll talk in a moment. I've done a little bit of work trying to prioritize, at least the first few. When you get deeper, maybe not so much. But these are all of the dictionaries or Greek tools that I have that might give me a definition of that word. So I'm going to keep coming down. It will also show me all of the ways in my translation. So right now I have the ESV open. So where that word appears in the ESV, this is the sort of range of translation that it's used. So at times it's news, gospel, proclaim, preach. You get a sense of how the ESV is translating it. Really important to remember that's just the ESV and how it's handling that. If I keep coming down, I can see how often the word occurs. So it gives me this little chart that's kind of helpful. You can see it's pretty frequent. And it's giving me the various forms on how it's used. They have quite a few other tools, so some sense tools that is trying to break down from, instead of just how it's being used, it's trying to group those into a little broader categories of usage. It also gives me some example usage, so based on different parts of grammar, how it's functioning, where it's handled as the subject versus the direct object, so I can see those. There's a lot you could do here and dig deep. For me, the things that I tend to be using is I often will if I click on one of these, it'll give me all of the references where that word has been used and translated that particular way. That's sometimes helpful for me to see. I often will see how often the word occurs, and so that's helpful to be able to see where it's showing up. I mean, as we would expect, it's showing up here in Acts a lot, as well as looks Luke in particular, which makes sense as we're seeing it in Acts and Luke. So I will often use this. But really the thing I'm doing is I'm really trying to get a sense from these lexicons and from them jumping deeper. And the way that I've tried to prioritize these, I did this in the last tutorial, but if you come to your library, and if you click up in the right-hand corner, these three dots, you have the option to prioritize your books. That's already open here. And then you can search for these in this case, these Greek lexicons, and you can organize them in the ones you want to see first in this list, which I've roughly done. Sometimes I make changes. And I've generally tried to put a couple of short lexicons that give me basic definitions up front, and then a couple of my favorite longer, more article-based ones. So from there, you can basically just start clicking in. So the first one that I have categorized is the concise Greek-English lexicon in the New Testament. You'll notice what it has for euangelizo is fairly short. So to announce, to announce good news, you can read through. And then you can work your way down into, again, some of the other shorter ones. So not a particularly long article. But if I were to come down here to perhaps BDAG, this is one of the ones I've been using quite a bit lately, the New International Dictionary of New Testament Theology and Exegesis, 5 volumes. You'll notice this particular article here is pretty extensive. So, I mean, all of this, one of the things I like that it does is it will break down in classical Greek, so in Greek literature, and then in Jewish literature, so it's the Hebrew, particularly the Septuagint, and then New Testament use. They kind of use this pattern across. I really like this resource, but this is all still, one article on that word that we were just talking about. So I've worked basically in this handful that I've categorized at the top, from simple definitions to longer ones. And where that comes in helpful, so I mean, this word we're looking at here, the gospel, euangelion, euangelizo, is used frequently, so there's a lot of information. But occasionally you come across more interesting things. So I was reading the sentence above, but they did not find anything they could do, for all the people were hanging on his words. And I thought, boy, that's an interesting way that Luke puts that. I'm interested in this word, which was not a word I was familiar with. Ekromenumai, so ekromanumi. See, I got the pronunciation wrong. And the reason I'm not familiar with this Greek word is it only shows up one time. It's a hapax legomena is the word for when a word is used a single time. In all of the New Testament, the word only shows up once. I don't think there's anything profound by the fact that he's using this word, other than it's Luke's a great writer, and he's using a word here that I think has some artistic quality to it. And so the only place we get to see it is here. If you come down, it shows up here. It is interesting. You can get other places, textual searches. So the LXX is the Septuagint. So if I search the Septuagint, it apparently shows up in Genesis. But again, it's pretty rare there as well. But this is a place where I do think it's interesting to get a sense for what some of the dictionaries are saying. So a basic definition: to hang from or upon an imagery of one held in suspense by a person's words. So they're referencing Luke. If I keep reading some of these other ones, my shorter definitions: to hang from or upon a thing. Lonida usually has pretty good definitions as well. Figurative, extension of, so it comes from another word, to hang out from, which is not in the New Testament. So you're starting to learn some. Pay usually close attention to what is being said. Once again, this is certainly not a word you're going to build some great piece of theology on. But it is interesting. Luke has a pretty robust vocabulary. He's using words you don't find other places. And it's an interesting picture. I think this is a good translation, but it's certainly an artistic way of saying they're not just listening, but they're grasping for, they're held in suspense by what Jesus is saying. You get a sense of that word by digging into it. We could do a whole tutorial on how to do word studies. There's certainly a methodology, there's safeguards, and there's plenty of other great resources online. But what I wanted to show you was kind of the day in and day out. If I have a question about the language, if I'm working and I want to know what's going on behind the scenes, this certainly what I've shown you doesn't qualify as a full comprehensive word study. But these are some of the day-to-day tools, the everyday tools I'm using to try to get a sense of what's going on. So I'm looking at it in the actual passage, trying to work it out myself through their the guides that they have built in. And then if I have questions about specific words, being able to right click on those and pull up all my lexicons organized and work through them. Again, for some this may be too much, but hopefully what I'm demonstrating is there's really powerful tools set up in Logos for doing language work. And even for somebody who just has a beginning point, kind of introductory level of languages, I think there's a lot of value. In fact, one of the things you might have noticed, we've talked in a previous tutorial, collections, about saving shortcuts. I actually have right now open several of the grammars, the educational books around Greek. Of course, Mounts was the one I used in seminary, but a couple of more recent ones that have come out, because I am still trying to open up and continue learning, refer back. Language skills is something, unless you use them, they tend to go away. And so you see these open in my shortcuts, because as I've been working through Luke and as I'm preparing for Acts, I'm still trying to dig in and continue improving my Greek as well. So plenty that you can do, from learning to searching to digging into some of the best scholarship. I would also recommend, if you are interested in the language, pick up one of the commentaries that specifically focuses on language. So in this case, this is my copy of the New International Greek Commentary, and it's a really helpful one if I do. Again, if I'm seeing something or have questions, I'll often then turn to that Greek commentator and see if they're pointing anything out about it as well, as I'm sort of piecing together that language work myself. A lot to go through, plenty more you could do with languages, and certainly more expert work as well. But I think that's a kind of rudimentary, everyday, kind of behind-the-scenes look at the language tools I'm using in Logos as I'm studying. If you're interested in trying out Logos, if you've not before, I've got a 30-day free trial that you're welcome to do. There's information in the notes. And I've also got a whole article on the website with some more tutorials specifically talking about why now might be the best time to sign up for Logos because of their new subscription plans. I'd love to hear how you're using Logos. If you have questions, I'd be happy to maybe even put out some more of these tutorials. But between collections, custom layouts, and the language tools I'm using, you've gotten a pretty good glimpse into what it looks like week in and week out as I'm studying a passage of Scripture. I'm looking forward to being back in Luke's Gospel with you with more YouTube videos. So subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you back for some of those studies.